Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 3 of ISE 2017. We're here in a very frosty Amsterdam. We're on the NEC Display Solutions stand, Hall 5, stand R24. Now, with me today, we have one of the very original industry digital signage bloggers, Dave Haynes, the owner, editor, General Dog's Body of 16.9.
General what?
General Dog's Body.
Okay.
It's a term of endearment.
Okay.
This is your second time at the show. What have you seen this year that maybe has caught your eye?
It's still blows me away how big it is. I was just looking at the numbers that say it's now 70,000 people. It's intriguing in that Digital Signage Expo, it's a great show, I go to it every year. That has about 200 vendors. This has like 500 vendors that say they do digital signage. Now, granted, some of them aren't really in the digital signage business, they just tick a box or whatever, but I mean, there's a lot of vendors here, and what's crazy to me is I will walk into something like the LG booth and go into the area where they've got all the LG WebOS vendors in there. And yesterday I did that, and I think I saw 7 digital signage CMS companies that I'd never heard of. And I spend all my time looking at this stuff, and if anybody's would have heard of them, it would be me. So it's remarkable how many companies there still are, and like there's got to be 10 companies from Sweden, and I've met 3 from Norway. And I'm like, how does this happen? Where do all these guys come from?
Well, I think we've always said as industry consultants, Dave, I know you do a lot of consulting, but the barrier to entry for digital signage is very low. We looked in Hall 8 earlier this morning, and we found another dozen or so vendors. Some from the outskirts, the middle of nowhere in the UK, as you say, Norway and other places as well.
Well, yeah, and I think some of them can do okay as long as they figure out what they're doing and find some specialty that nobody else is doing. I just talked to a company over here in the Toshiba booth, and they've integrated with a bunch of ERP systems for supermarkets. So they're right into the back office of the system, and little tiny company, never heard of them, but they've got something there. Versus a lot of these companies who just say, we're friendly, we're easy to use, we're low cost and all that.
Well, you broke some news, I think yesterday or maybe last night when you were writing up about Intel's product that they've launched for sort of system on a chip.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to look at the Raspberry Pi stuff that NEC have done as well, and how do you think that fits into the system on chip mentality?
Well, I write a blog called 16.9. I pay attention to my analytics, and day after day, the second busiest post on my blog gets hundreds of page views a day, is about Raspberry Pi. There's an intense amount of interest out there, and I think a lot of people are just figuring out ways to cut out costs, and that's a maker product. It's a hobbyist product, at least it started that way. So for a commercial company like an NEC to set up kind of a professional module with a proper snap-in port for it and everything else, I think is a big, big move. And I think it adds a lot of credibility to the platform itself. And I think for NEC it's smart because everybody else is using ARM system on chip embedded displays. This is removable. It's a different system. It doesn't mean you have to develop to Android or Linux or whatever. You can stay with Windows if that's what you want. So I think it's wise.
Okay, well, I think 2017 is going to be very interesting from that whole market with the display manufacturers. Let me get on to some of the other stuff that you do. Consulting's one of them, the blog. You started your blog, I think 5 or 6 years before we even did, but the thing you've been really getting into recently is your podcasts. And you managed to do a couple, how many have you done this week so far?
I've done, there's 41 episodes out, and this week I think I've done 10 interviews. And so I've got enough in the can for the next couple months, which is awesome. And I started it because, as a writer, you talk to companies and you spend half an hour with them, 45 minutes with them, and you go back and write something, and you capture about 5%, 10% of what they actually say. I got a lot to do. I work with a lot of companies doing other things, so I don't have all day to just produce something. So this is a great way to spend a good amount of time with somebody, record it all, and just put it up on the system. I get a guy in Namibia to master the thing for me. He sends it back to me in Dropbox. I put it up in the system, and I'm done. And it's great, and it's a great way for a company to sit and talk about what they're doing in a relaxed fashion. And I coach him to like, don't make this a pitch session. Don't say how awesome you are. Just tell me about how this got started and where you're going. So I'm getting like 2,000 downloads an episode.
Okay. Well, we talked a little bit about open pluggable specific OPS and the Raspberry Pi, the OMI, and the system on a chip stuff. What other trends have you seen either leading into this event or actually at the event?
Well, obviously this stuff. The fine pixel pitch LED stuff is just taking over, and I think more rapidly than a lot of companies expected. Guys like Rich Ventura here at NEC, a year ago he was saying he thinks it's about 5 years before it really starts to take over from video walls. But I was talking to somebody yesterday saying in places like Dubai, it's already happening. Like regular video walls are almost dead. And I don't quite get it, because I think super narrow, extreme narrow pitch LCD video walls look beautiful. They look spectacular. In most respects, I think they look better than this. But I think it's just a thing that there's still a whole phenomena in the signage industry where end users want the latest, greatest, and this is the latest, greatest at the moment.
Well, we interviewed the Future Source people yesterday, the consultant. They've got an LED report coming out at the end of February talking about the whole thing. Chip on board was one of the things they were saying was improving the quality of the screens, but of course the cost is coming down and the pixel pitch and the quality is just generally going up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and the other thing you hear over and over again from a lot of the vendors is the end users are a lot more mature in terms of understanding what they want to do and why they want to do it. So there's still this whole wow factor thing where somebody says, yeah, I want that, I want this huge video wall at the back of my store, but more and more they're talking about analytics and okay, what are we going to get out of this? And I think that one of the things that's really driving the signage industry these days is corporate communications and simple things like meeting room signs, because you can instantly see what the value of this is versus investing $500,000 on fine pitch video wall at the back of your flagship store. And yes, it looks awesome, but what's the actual return on that versus a lot of corporate communication stuff? It's solving problems, and you know instantly that it solves a problem.
Now, we're really pleased to have you here at the show, just generally on the NEC stand, but we're pleased that you came to the show for the first time last year, so it's good that you come back, and I'm sure you'd agree that this is a show that you'll return to every year, but you do quite a few other shows throughout the year. DSE is probably next for you. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing at DSE.
Every year at DSE I do a mixer. It's a networking party, and it started out just as kind of a lark 9 years ago. I'm going to be here if anybody else wants to show up, and about 50 people showed up, and it just kind of went from there. So the last several years, I get about 400 people who show up, and I get sponsors, they pay for the tickets and everything else, and it's become sort of the annual, or the traditional kickoff for DSE week. Then the rest of the time there, I'm just wandering around talking to companies, and because like you, I've been in the industry for a long, long time, it's DSE itself, the trade show floor is more of like a networking thing for me. I don't really have time to look at much, because if you've been in the industry for a long time, you know everybody, and you end up in the aisles just chatting.
So DSE has a couple of challenges, I suspect, going forward. It hasn't really grown as much as this show by a long way. And the Digital Signage Federation, I think, is doing lots of education. Any thoughts on what DSE can actually do to get bigger and grow and become more prominent?
Yeah, well, I'm glad I'm not in the trade show business. That's a hard business, and I know Andrea, who is show director, every year they have to go out and recruit more companies to come to the show, and they have new vendors that come in, they have new buyers that come in, and it's a big challenge, and I don't terribly know how you grow that thing so much. The term digital signage is convenient and it's familiar and all that, but it's such a broad opportunity now, whether you want to call it visual communications or whatever. I don't know if you rebrand it or what, but it's a little bit, it's kind of in its narrow slot, and I don't know how you get out of it.
Right. Have you got any other shows planned for the rest of the year after DSE?
I'm going to go to Infocom, obviously in Orlando, but as far as I know, I'm speaking in Infocom in Beijing as well. I've never been to Beijing, so that's going to be an interesting long trip there and back, but never been there. That'll be fascinating.
Okay, Dave, just tell everybody quickly where everybody can find your blog and your podcasts.
All right, blog is 16-9.net, and I post all the podcast episodes on there, but it would be 16.9 with no dash, 16.9.podbean.com. And you can get it on Google Play or iTunes, listed on both of those.
Dave Haynes, thank you very much.
Thank you.